Okay, well, welcome to class, guys. I hope you guys all had a good 4th of July weekend, and hope you did something fun to celebrate. Even though, there's a lot of commotions going on in the country, a lot of conflicts and other trials and challenges, it's still a great nation. And not one day do I regret moving here from China. So count your blessings for being here and having been born here. I think all of you are not international students, right? If you're international, I'm sure you feel similar to how I feel about being here. So anyway,
Wait, real
let
quick.
yeah.
Was I the only person who watched Hamilton for the first time this weekend?
Me too. Yeah, I actually
I,
haven't finished it yet. I started pretty late Saturday night. I'm about halfway, but yeah.
yeah, it's the kind of thing where you got to listen real close. It's kind of yeah. So
Yeah.
I think it was interesting. I think it. I don't know. I just think it's kind of hard to leave out how Hamilton, even though he was one of the early examples of like the American dream. Like he starts out poor, he was a nobody, and then he becomes the first Secretary of the Treasury. But he was actually, and the play and the musical doesn't talk about this, but he was super elitist. He was actually, and like not to disparage the man. I mean, I think he really is one of the important founding fathers. I mean, just read the Federalist Papers. This guy's important, but he was he he believed in the idea of having an elite, and thankfully he had other guys who really did not like that idea, and so we have this wonderful compromise, which is our constitutional system. But I don't know, just something to keep in the back of your mind while you watch it is it's not the most comprehensive view of Hamilton.
Oh, I'm sure it's a musical, so yeah. I mean, it's entertaining. It's got some real information, but you can't take it as history, right? But anyway, so let me tell you the plan for the rest of the semester and a couple other administrative things before we move on to today's material. So we are only a little over a week away from the end of the semester, okay? So we're going to finish Unit 9 today, and just now I was looking on my YouTube channel. Only 7 people have watched the video for today's lecture. So I hope that's because of the long weekend, because if you just stop watching that, then you're not going to get much out of this class. And that's where I get all the meaty stuff and explain, so you can pause, rewind, or speed up, whatever. So if you are one of those people that have not watched that video, repent quickly. Otherwise, it's going to bite you pretty hard on the final, okay? All right, so we finished Unit 9 today, and then we'll finish Unit 10 next Monday, and then we'll do a review for the final next Wednesday, and then your test, your final opens up right after the review on Wednesday and runs through the next Saturday, okay? So that's what's coming up, and it's happening pretty fast. The final includes the last 3 units, so make sure you plan ahead. And after today, you'll have 2 of those 3 units already covered. So start reviewing and studying. Now, one thing I forgot to mention last time was I usually give students a second extra credit opportunity after the second exam. And this one is called Econ Photos. And what you do is I want you to go find 2 pictures in your own life that illustrate some economic principles that you've learned in this class. Okay, so take a picture of something that reminds you of something you learned in this class, and submit that on iLearn with a short paragraph explaining which economic principle that picture represents and why. And do this with at least two different economic principles you've learned in this class. And I'll give you another 1% of your total grade as extra credit. I'll give you a week to do this. So I'll open up that Dropbox and make the due date um, uh, for next Monday. Okay, so keep that in mind. And now it has to be your original photos. And you can, now I know that not everybody is going out. So if you can find one that you can use from your past, that's fine with me. But I don't want you to go online and just download some photo and talk about it, right? I want you to start practicing seeing economics in your own life with your own eyes. Okay, so um, anyway, so if you do that, then I'll give you another 1% as extra credit. Okay, all right, any questions? Okay, another thing I want to talk about is after our last class, I got the report from the testing center about proctoring your exams, because I told you that your exams recordings are reviewed very carefully by people. Now, a couple of you had earphones on the whole time, or not have your camera facing your face, right? If you do this or if you do that, that's not going to work. Okay. Now this time I'll not count that as cheating, but for the final, please make sure you cannot listen to anything while you're taking an exam. I know many of you like to listen to music when you work on things, but not during an exam. Okay, so take that earphone off, and then make sure your camera points to your face and the room has good lighting. Okay, that's another issue. One of you was sitting in a really dark room and the camera was pointing to their, hair. So that's some serious red flags. So since this is your first, offense, if you will, I will not count that as intentional, but we cannot do that on the final, right? Because after all, I need to maintain the integrity of exams, even though it's remote. Okay, so you got to do everything right to take it seriously. Okay. All right. Questions? All right. If not, then let's talk about this unit. I know that only less than half of you actually watched the video, so I hope the rest of you at least read the chapter. Any questions from um, Unit 9? Okay, so this one is the chapter on how the Fed does monetary policies, how monetary policies work through the economic system to impact real GDP. And so it's kind of the core of the last 3 units, how what your final is going to cover. Okay, and at the end, we also talked about the equation of exchange theory, quantity theory of money, and then the Phillips curve, which are to me kind of different, right, and could be challenging. Okay, any questions? Don't tell me the 7 that watched the video are not here in class today. That would be quite the odds, right? Or I was just that good at explaining everything made sense. I don't know. No questions? All right. Well, then this might be a short class. Then let's do a little activity. So um, what I want you to do, let me find the okay, so I want you to, well, actually, first of all, let me just share this screen with you, but I want you to get there eventually yourself, okay? All right, can you guys all see this page, web page? Okay, good. So this is the web page for the San Francisco Federal Reserve, okay? Now, what we're gonna do is that I'll put you into groups and you'll play a little game actually running the Federal Reserve to control the monetary policies for the economy and try to fix things, okay? And so if you go to frbsf.org, so that stands for Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, so frbsf.org, then you'll come to this page, and you click on menu right here, okay, and then education, okay, so menu and then education, and you don't have to play this game right now. I'll demonstrate to you how this works, but then if you scroll down to the second thing, once you open the education page, it's called Chair the Fed. It's a little game that the Fed has had for a long time, okay? And if you click on it, you can click on Launch Game, but for now, don't click on this. I'll show you how this works, and then you'll have your chance to work this together, okay? So this Chair the Fed game, okay? I will tell you what your job is. So you, okay, so this game assumes that you are now the chair of the Federal Reserve, okay, which gives you the most power controlling the most, the biggest economy in the world, okay. Now, if you recall, we said as the chair of the Federal Reserve, you serve for 4 years, right? You serve as a governor for 14 years, but if you're appointed to be chair, then that's a 4-year appointment. Afterwards, if you don't get reappointed, you could remain a governor for another 10 years, but most people resign and leave. But anyway, so you have 16 quarters, 4 years. That this little circle right here, the upper right corner, shows you how many quarters you have left in your position, okay? And here you have 3 lines on this graph. The blue line is your unemployment rate, and the blue dotted line is your target. For the United States, our natural rate of unemployment is roughly 5%. So this is the dotted line is your target. The solid blue line is the actual, okay? And the red line is your inflation. Again, solid is actual inflation, dotted is your target inflation of 2%. Okay. Now, your job is to maintain these 2 lines, the blue line, the red line, as closely to their respective targets target as possible. Right? You want the blue line to be as close to 5% as possible, and the red line at 2% as close as possible. Okay. Now your tool is this green line, which is the federal funds rate, right? In the video, I explained very carefully what the federal funds rate and how the Fed can manipulate this, right? We said the Fed cannot just dictate this directly without doing anything, but they can impact this by manipulating money supply using any of those tools we talked about, right? So if the Fed increases money supply, this rate will go one way. If it decreases money supply, it will go the other. I won't tell you which way because you have to, if you don't remember, ask your group members. But anyway, the point is this is the tool you can use when you raise or lower this rate, then that eventually is going to impact real GDP. Okay, it's going to, because when this rate changes, it changes the amount of investment in the economy, which then shifts your aggregate demand to the left or right, depending on what you need. Okay, so and then here on top you have the news brief where it gives you whatever shock you might experience in the economy. Okay, sometimes it's just reporting what you're doing, but in this game there's going to be a couple of shocks that you don't see. You get blindsided, and something's going to happen to mess your plan up, and then you have to fix it. Okay, so I'm going to go a few quarters just to show you how this works, and then you can take over and play this. Okay, so now you look at this, you can decide a couple of things. If you think, hey, the blue line, the red line are pretty close to their target, then you can just click go, and they'll go 1 quarter at a time, and you can maintain this current rate of 4% for the federal funds rate. But if you're like me, you like to intervene early, you look at this and you say, okay, the unemployment rate is dropping, inflation rate is rising. Okay, I see the trend, even though they're pretty close to their target, but the trend tells me the economy is expanding beyond the potential GDP, right? And so I want to cool it down. To cool it down, then what do you do with the federal funds rate? Do you raise it or do you lower it? What do you do to cool it down? So, okay, Luke said we raise it, and that's correct, right? When you raise the federal funds rate, that is when you make it more difficult to invest. So investment will decrease, and then aggregate demand shifts to the left, closing any expansionary gap. Now, to raise your federal funds rate, what do you do with money supply? Do you increase or decrease money supply? Okay. Yeah, so you got to go back to the graphs we drew, right? You decrease money supply, okay, to raise the federal funds rate. Now the question is, if you want to decrease money supply, assuming you're using the open market operations, which is the most common tool for the Fed, do you buy or sell government securities? So to cut, right, to decrease money supply, do you buy or sell government securities?
You sell.
So,
You sell. Very good. Okay. When the Fed sells government securities, then then money comes into the Fed, bonds, government securities go out. So once money comes into the Fed, the Fed sits on top of it. It's no longer circulating in the banking system and in the economy. So that decreases money supply, right? So this is a process that you need to be very familiar with. Okay. So anyway, so if you're like me, you say, hey, I don't like the trend. I'm going to raise it to, let's say, 5.5. I don't know. I just, it's just random. Then you can click on go, and then you can see it shows you so first of all, the news says you've raised the federal funds rate, and it shows you that your rate, the green line, has increased, and instantly you can see the trend for unemployment is going back toward the target, and inflation is flattening out a little bit as well. If you like what you're seeing here, you can just not change anything and click on go. I'll go another quarter, okay? And so, news says economy looks well balanced, and you can just keep it like this if you want. I just want to show you when a shock happens, if you just keep going. Okay, so Fed keeps the rate steady, and let's go one more. I think, oh, there's the shock. It says oil crisis hits the economy. Gasoline prices jump as oil imports are cut. So now you got to interpret this news as to how this impacts your economy, right? So if gasoline prices go higher, what does that mean? Does that affect your supply side or demand side, right? And is it let's say if it's a supply side, then you have to figure out, is it a positive shock or negative shock? Is it a temporary shock or permanent shock? Then figure out what you do to fix this, okay? And to fix this, you change this rate. Now, your goal is to be reappointed after your whole 4 years. Okay, after your 16 quarters countdown runs out, if these two blue lines and the blue line, the red line are close enough to their targets, you'll be reappointed. That's how you win the game. Otherwise, it says, you're fired, right? So now, what I'm gonna do is I'll put you into, I'll stop sharing right now, okay, and I'll put you into breakout rooms, and probably about 3, maybe 4 people a room, and then I think one of you should just share your screen, and then the rest of you will look at that screen and talk about what to do together, and then see who can win first. Once I'll give you some time to do some practice, do a practice round, and then I'll officially start this. Okay, the first group that finishes this successfully, okay, and you come out of your break room right away, and well, actually probably take a screenshot, then or not, or yeah, you don't have to take a screenshot, because you can just come out of your breakout room and then share that screen with me to show me that you got reappointed. And if you're the first one, I'll give you 2 points bonus question. I mean, 2 bonus points added to your second exam that you just took. I'll add 2 points to whatever you earn. Okay, so there's some, like I said, I'll give you some practice time. So I'll put you into breakout rooms right now. Okay, and give you, maybe 3 or 4 minutes to practice this. Just have one person share the screen and the rest of you just talk together to decide what to do instead of each working on their own game. Okay, I want you to work together and figure out this together. And after a few minutes of practice, I'm going to send a message to all the breakout rooms to say, reset your game, because if you click on start over in the lower left corner, you'll start all over and everybody will start at the same time. And then whichever group gets reappointed first, earns that bonus. Okay, sound good? Any questions? All right, then I'm going to put you into breakout rooms, and you have, let's say, 5 minutes to practice. Then I'll stop you, and we'll start officially, okay? And there are many different scenarios for the shocks, so if you finish one practice round, don't just assume you'll get the same thing and you can do the same thing and win, okay? There's, I think, like more than a dozen different types of shocks, so you're not going to get the same thing again. So focus on how to understand the process instead of just memorizing what you did for the practice round, if it worked, okay? All right, let me see. Okay, we got 4 groups, and go ahead and get in and start practicing. I'll give you 5 minutes for that. Then I'll tell you when to start, okay? Josh, are you there? You got to go to your breakout room. Okay, so what did you learn from that game? Tell me something. What did you think? Did it help you understand the theory a little bit better? Inflation sucks. Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, inflation definitely is not pleasant when it's especially when it's bad, right? But did it help you um, make the connection from the abstract graphs to how things might work? I know this is still extremely simplified, but it is essentially what the Fed does, the biggest job for the Fed, right? Did it help you kind of make that connection a little bit? Okay, well, what did you think about being the chair of the Fed? Would you want that job one day? No? Too hard? Uh, yeah, it's not the easiest job in the world, but you would be the too much responsibility. Don't shirk from responsibility, Josh. Yeah, but you would be the most powerful person in terms of controlling the world economy, right? Because the Fed does not just control the U.S. economy, because the world is so interconnected nowadays. If you change the U.S. economy, you affect pretty much all other major countries. The Federal Reserve chair before this one was the first woman. Her name was Janet Yellen. She was only about 4'10", tiny little lady, but nobody took her, lightly. And she it's kind of funny because whenever she spoke in public, she always had to stand on a little pedestal, kind of what we have, for kids to bear testimonies at church. But nobody dared to laugh at her because she was, the most powerful woman in the world in terms of the power she held in her hands, and more so than some heads of state, like the Chancellor of Germany, because the Chancellor of Germany could control that one nation, but Janet Yellen had the power to topple the world if she really went nuts, right? So, but anyway, well, I was expecting a lot more questions from the theory part of the video, in the reading, but you guys didn't really have any. Last chance, any questions you thought of while you were doing the game or while we were talking? Okay, I fear this might be
Just
because, yeah, go ahead.
just could you briefly explain again the
Phillips curve.
Phillips, yes, the Phillips curve.
Okay, the Phillips curve is the relationship between the inflation rate and the unemployment rate when we use policy to manipulate the economy. Okay, so and you can see when we use policy to manipulate the economy, we shift the aggregate demand curve. So then when we shift the aggregate demand curve to the right, we'll have inflation, but we'll have lower unemployment rate because shifting to the right means you have more GDP, and more GDP means more jobs and lower unemployment, right? If aggregate demand curve shifts to the left, then you'll have lower inflation or deflation, but then higher unemployment rate because more people lose their jobs when you shift the aggregate demand to the left. So in the short run, it's a negatively sloped curve, just like what your aggregate demand looks like. It's a negatively sloped or a line that's going downward. So that means in the short run, if you want to lower unemployment rate, you have to suffer higher inflation. If you want to lower inflation, you have to suffer higher unemployment. Okay. Now in the long run, we said that is a vertical line because in the long run, your real GDP will always go back to the potential level. Okay, no matter what. That's why your long run aggregate supply curve is a vertical line, and so that means in the long run, no matter what, your GDP always goes back to normal, the potential level. And since GDP is so closely related to unemployment, that means in the long run, unemployment will always go back to the natural rate of unemployment. But inflation will stick because if inflation is high, people will come to expect high inflation. They'll negotiate high wage increases, and that raises the cost of production, which means firms will have to raise prices to accommodate that. So high inflation will not go away on its own. So your long run Phillips curve is also a vertical curve sitting right on top of your natural rate of unemployment. So in the video, I talk about because of that, when you are facing stagflation, right, where you have high inflation and high unemployment, we talked previously that that's a very difficult situation because your policy can only fix one while making the other problem worse. If you want to fix inflation, you're going to have to suffer higher unemployment. If you want to fix unemployment, you have to suffer higher inflation. And now we know which one to fix, right? Because if unemployment rate will always go back to the natural rate on its own, we should always fix inflation because inflation will not correct itself. And that's exactly what the Federal Reserve did in the 1980s, where we were facing 14, 15% inflation rate in the country, and that was not going to go away. So they induced a recession and brought the inflation rate down to about 2%. We've been able to hold it about 2% since then. But unemployment became much worse for quite a few years. And that was a price the Fed realized that they had to pay in order to bring our economy back to normal, right? Like Faith said, inflation sucks, right? Because once it gets there, it doesn't go away. Okay. All right. Okay. Did that help, Josh?
To clarify that, you said so when people expect inflation, they create inflation.
Yep, because when you expect inflation, then you will ask for at least that much of a raise to make sure your standard of living does not decrease, right? But when you ask for that kind of raise and get it, then that means the producers have just gone up, their cost has just gone up by however much of a raise you asked for, right? Because labor is a big part of production cost, and that higher cost has to be covered somehow, and that's covered by raising the prices, which makes your inflation, your expectation of higher inflation come true, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Any other questions? All right. For those of you who have not watched the video, please go watch the video because, like I said, this unit is kind of the core of, the last exam. So two of the three units on the last exam are on the banking system, money and monetary policy. So please don't, just brush this off. And then I will make the next video in the next couple days, post it. Please watch that before class so you can get a lot more out of it. And next Monday, we will finish Unit 10, and that would be the end of all the new materials. And next Wednesday, again, we'll have a review based on your questions for the final. Okay, so start looking ahead, and there's a study guide for the final. Hopefully by now you know how to approach the exams, and so start early. Cramming really won't work. It'll hurt you. Okay. All right, I will see you guys in a week. Have a good week, and see you guys next Monday.